So chapter 7 focuses on listening, which is an aspect of learning a different language that we don't really emphasize in schools as much as reading and writing. I think we read somewhere that in elementary school, after elementary school, they don't really, there's not as much emphasis on listening. Even though it is a route to language development, you can't really completely learn a new language without being able to be an active listener. And I thought it was really interesting. There was actually an activity in the book, an example where they said, oh, if your partner was saying a sentence and you were told to say the sentence as they're saying it, you would basically only be like a syllable behind. But if they did it backwards, you would have a much harder time, and it's because you don't really have prior knowledge. You have no idea what's going to come next. You don't know what the content of the sentence is because it's all jumbled up. And that made so much sense to me, because if you're trying to listen to something that you don't even understand, you don't understand the content, you have no prior knowledge, how do you make sense of it? And so we need more than just the acoustic information to gain meaning. It's not just about listening, you have to be actively listening. And there's two types of listening. There's two-way and there's one-way. And it can be either of interpersonal topics or information-based topics. And I thought it was really interesting that learning that for English learners, it's easier for them to engage in two-way listening as opposed to one-way. And that's probably because they're able to ask questions and be a little more active in the process in two-way conversations. And then the book gives some implications for teaching and some strategies to kind of encourage two-way and one-way listening. One way that I liked for two-way listening was the split dictation. This is actually an activity that I'm thinking about using for my class. It's when you have two gapped versions of a text, with each text having different gaps. So in pairs, the students kind of have to trade off and read each other's parts to each other so they can fill in their own paper. And I thought this was so great and different than the usual gap writing activities that we do, because it really encourages students to listen in. I don't know how you would work to encourage students not to just copy each other, but it could be done. I also liked the idea of how in one-way listening, one activity is, if you are, and this would probably be a great opener for class, if you are, wearing a red shirt, do this, and they maybe write red shirt on the top of your paper, or basically encouraging them to listen actively. And this would be a great way to get students' attention at the beginning of class. So I thought that was really interesting. So next, chapter 8 talks about developing an integrated curriculum, basically integrating English language development and all those strategies into regular content classes, as opposed to just having a completely different curriculum in a really different class. And we know that English learners will learn better when they are working with other students who are linguistically different from them, who vary. We need that diversity in the classroom. So it's not really fair when they only have one. When you're in a class with only ELD learners, it's not really fair, because you're not getting to see how native speakers speak. You're not getting that modeling. And so this chapter really just focuses on the importance of integrating that with the regular content classes. And another thing is that it's easier for you to learn more of your content courses if you are, it's kind of a reciprocal process. So you're learning more of the content as you're learning the language. Another thing that this chapter talks about is assessments, and how assessment activities themselves could be examples of worthwhile learning. An example of this is they can kind of be informal, like paired problem solving, and or like pair problem solving, where each pair is working on a problem, they're solving it, and then they're like talking to each other and trying to make sense of what they wrote. And it's not really about right or wrong answers. It's more about encouraging students to actively listen and learn from each other. And the chapter brings back the 4 stages of teaching and learning cycle that were described in an earlier chapter. Building the field, modeling and deconstructing the genre, joint construction, and independent writing. And it really talks about how students need to be encouraged to do metacognition, like thinking about their own thinking about their language use and how they can improve on it, and how very effective speakers and writers really reflect on how they use the language, and showing students how to do this.